Hi, Bobby. How are you doing?
Good, Sarbjeet. How are you, sir?
Good, good. Thanks for finding some time this Thursday after the infrastructure keynote during reInvent. We're going to riff on the announcements made this week. Some of the sessions are still going on behind the scenes,
Yep,
practitioner-based sort of sessions or practitioner-related sessions. They keep going on till I think even tomorrow they will go on. But we
uh-huh.
will call this the week two wrap up from those
Okay.
two keynotes, and we will try to go through machine learning keynote,
Uh-huh.
and today's keynote it was infrastructure, and that doesn't mean we can't touch on Andy Jassy's keynote. We can refer
Uh-huh.
to it because I think it's built on top of that. These two keynotes are they kind of
Absolutely.
a reference point to the core keynote what Andy gave, which was awesome, I think.
Absolutely.
So with that, what's your take on it briefly? I know you have only 25, 30 minutes
Yeah.
and you have to run, and
Mhm.
we'll keep it brief. So what's your
Mhm.
take on it so far on AWS? And then we can jump into maybe week two, just overall.
I think my take on, I guess we'll start with the ML keynote.
Hmm.
I felt like it was clear that SageMaker was the star of that keynote, right? SageMaker is almost an ecosystem within an ecosystem by itself
Yeah.
because they announced so many different services that are extensions of SageMaker. And so, yeah, I really loved the section where Dr. Cephas presented her section on SageMaker Clarify. I love with the concept of that service, and I hope the implementation is as real as the promise because Clarify is supposed to kind of keep us honest, right? That's the promise of it, to deal with biases
Yeah.
in AI and ML. And what's interesting about that, when I think about, so we know that we've got data is the lifeblood of the enterprise, right? We know that. And
Yeah.
some folks will say storage is the veins. And we know that there's so much data that we've got to automate what we do with it. But what about biases introduced in those automated models?
Yeah.
And so what comes out of this to me, Sarjeet, what I was so excited about the SageMaker Clarify is someone is addressing the fact, at least on paper, that we need to not just have automation of looking at the data, but we need to have accountability and ethics around the insights that come out of that data because people can be impacted now by what we glean from that if a group is left out or certain type of bias. So I'm excited about that because that's where it feels like capability and consequences are being kind of combined.
Yeah, and I saw your tweet which you shared about your daughter looking like the presenter during that
Mhm.
event.
Yep. Dr. Cephas.
What was the
Dr. Cephas.
presenter's name again? You said mentioned from
Dr.
Amazon.
Cephas, I
Dr.
believe she
Stevens.
got her PhD at Georgia Tech. I don't know her personally, but would love to meet her one day. I think she's in the Southeast.
Yeah,
Very
yeah, yeah.
talented.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I think they are. I would be a little like more stringent or a little more critical about what they were saying. I think they can give us some tools to take the bias out of machine learning models. But as
Mhm.
a platform company, Amazon cannot do much, I believe. We have to do that as industries. If you're in
Mhm.
healthcare or in education or in auto, whatever industry you happen to be in, we
Mhm.
have to train our models in such a way. And before we even train the model, we have to change our personal behaviors because models are trained with data, right?
Yes.
So there's a big debate around where does the bias enter into the ML models? Is it during the like when you're cooking up the algos, or is it during the training? Is it coming from the data or from the algorithms, right?
Yeah.
So I think it comes mainly from the data, and even the most well-intentioned people end up injecting biases into systems. Actually, I was talking to my wife last night. They had a holiday party, and then all the she shared a story with me, and she was writing an email to her management there, which is she part of, that we need to include other people in it. Because if you're sharing all the Santa stories and then people cannot relate to it, some people
Yeah.
can't, right?
Exactly.
And then they're winning prizes and they can't relate to stories. Like, can we pick something a little more generic? You can share that too, but something else as well.
Yeah.
So, anyways, long story short, I think the bias comes from data. I think they can give us tools from Amazon, likes of
Mhm.
Amazon, Azure, Google. but I think it's on us, is on us. But it does bring up the awareness around having biases in the data model and machine learning. Actually, it's going to be a huge problem going forward.
I
You know.
think that here's the dilemma, subject, because I think the data itself, I don't know if the bias is in the data. It is in how the data is interpreted and applied. Let me give you a specific example your audience may not know about. If you Google professional hairstyles versus unprofessional hairstyles,
Okay.
if you're a black person,
Hmm.
you're gonna see straight hair, you're gonna see Caucasian hairstyles. Any sort of natural hair for black people always falls up under the unprofessional search.
Oh,
And
okay,
so
okay.
if you've got daughters, you've got kids, then what
Hmm.
they're seeing is that the perception of Google, right? Because people just assume that everything from a Google search is the truth, right? It's
Yeah,
on the internet, it must be the truth. You're getting a perception painted to you as a child that the way that my hair is and the way that my skin is unprofessional. And professional is something that I can't even aspire to. That's just how I'm made or how I'm
yeah.
not made. So those biases, and I think what people are realizing, Sarjeet, is that even things that are innocent can be damaging to children in terms of perceptions, because there are people that hate themselves because the standard is something that they can never achieve.
Yeah, and there are stereotypes and narratives out there which we can refute all day long, but Google is like capturing all the data, unless I think we can say that Google has built-in bias unintentionally or unintentionally. I don't think it's ever intentionally, but unintentionally they have built some bias into these algorithms. If
Mm-hmm.
they know that I'm Indian, so I'm shown only the Indian hairstyles or something like that, then I can understand that. I think they do that to a certain extent, a personalization based on the data and the cookies. And well, last
Mm-hmm.
time I searched was Indian groceries, and then when I search for groceries, they will show that kind of stuff. I think that it goes with. I mean, their argument is they're trying to help you out, right? But at
Mm-hmm.
the same time, we can get hurt. I mean, I'll be a little more philosophy kind of dude right now. I always think I end up going there in every technology discussion. I
Mm-hmm.
think biases are the basis of decision making. You can't make any decision without having bias. If you go deep, deep, deep level down, if you
Mm-hmm.
think about it, like you want to take a left here or right, that's a
Mm-hmm.
decision, right? And you didn't take left, you took right. And are you biased against left? Like what people living on the left side,
Right.
restaurants on the left side, are you biased against those? You can
Right.
pick on anything. I think we need to be cognizant about the fact that we're not building biases, and
Yeah.
people need to sort of keep reminding these big tech companies and themselves that we don't want to do it. But I think these are built in unintentionally. But I think diversity and biases go like in different directions. Means like if you want to kill the biases in technology, you have to have a diverse workforce. You have to have diversity of
Agreed.
economics, people who are not coming from all these rich backgrounds. You need
Yeah.
people coming from all kind of backgrounds: race, religion,
Yeah.
geography, economics, and all those other sort of thought sort of diversity you need. Okay, let's come back to the AWS reInvent.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
a few other things we chatted about, like talking on this during this talk was, oh yeah, you talk about better versus different. Look, what
Yeah.
is that?
Yeah.
Let's riff on that.
So this is so I think that's a cloud thing, and I think that's a life thing. I
Mm-hmm.
think that we're struggling to evaluate better versus different.
Mm-hmm.
And if we don't have a way to evaluate that, then this is where we're stuck, Sarbjeet. I think that when we have all these choices and all these options, because what cloud and the internet have done is it's reduced the distribution time for us to have something else thrown at us. We don't get a new product every year or every quarter. We get a new product every day, right? Think about all the stuff that Amazon changed last night, or
Yeah.
all the things that Andy Jassy announced in the keynote. So what I say is having a framework to choose is more important than the choice.
Yeah.
Because if you don't have a way to choose, then other options just overwhelm you and force you to abandon things. And so the struggle is, should I keep doing the same thing and tweak it? Or do I throw it out and start over? So to use a real estate analogy, do I need to move to a new house, or do I need to knock some walls down and remodel here? And this is what I think it comes down to. Better is going to have a ceiling.
Yeah.
in many ways, right? You can only get a faster horse, but so much before you have to say, now it's time to do a car.
Yeah.
And where I think a lot of enterprises and people are struggling, Sarbjeet, is quantifying the value of those two choices. And so
Yeah.
I'm gonna even disagree a little bit about what you said before. I do think bias is something that everybody has. I think there's some choices that are quantifiable, tangible, and I think there's some other things that are more subjective, right? Preference, choice, background, things like that. And when we're looking at better versus different, I think we're struggling because we don't know how to measure the gap between those two. Are these two things that are really about the same, or are these two things that are vastly different? And I need to abandon what I'm doing and start doing a whole different paradigm.
Yeah, I think on that actually, I get that at the philosophy level, at the idea level, it's good, but in reality, the key is that we want to future proof our investments.
Yes,
That's what you're talking about, right? How do I future proof
absolutely.
my investments, right?
Hmm.
Well, am I putting this money into an old car which I have to throw it away, and I can't even, because it's so old, because um yeah, maybe car analogy is wrong in this way, this context, but it makes sense in a way that, like, okay, if your car is like, 15 years old, you can put $10,000 into it and make it all shiny and all that stuff. Like, unless it's a
Yeah,
classic car, you can't recoup the cost, right?
yeah.
So at that point, it's like, we got to let it go,
Hmm.
because it's efficiency, the fuel efficiency, and then
Yeah.
you are in the repair shop every other day, so your
Hmm.
time is money, right? And
Yeah.
I believe, I think Andy said it in his keynote as well. Speed is a choice, right? It's not. It's a choice. You have to make that choice, and agility. Speed is a new scale. Actually, some folks, I think, at IDC said that. Somebody at
Hmm.
IDC. I mean, like, speed is the new scale. I believe in that. And
It is.
agility. Without agility, you can't attain speed, right? And
Hmm.
some people are willing to pay the price to be fast. You have to
Yes.
pay the price to be fast, right? And
Yes.
that's
Yeah.
that those are the people who gravitate towards the latest and greatest. And some of us in consumer tech, we do that, right?
We
And
do.
same way, the companies are like people. Like, they have behaviors, they have personas and all that stuff. Some companies want to be on cutting edge. Some verticals have certain behaviors, like
Hmm.
healthcare versus education versus, you
Hmm.
know um, auto versus financials are always on the cutting edge. We know that, right? We also know that healthcare is not on the cutting edge on the other end.
Yeah.
So they have the
Absolutely.
personas by vertical, by company, who the leaders at the company, what do they
Hmm.
value, are they trying to future proof their investments, and also, and like, it's like a risk mitigation in a way that some people, like, we another question actually I usually ask is, like, I want to pick your brain on that. What do you think about this?
Hmm.
I recently started thinking. I think a lot, actually. Like, sometimes can't go to sleep thinking about these things. It's a blessing and a curse.
Hmm.
That what percentage of your product is software?
Uh,
Think about that.
yeah.
If you start thinking in those terms,
Hmm.
right? How
Hmm.
then you will think how much we have digitized so far, and how far we need to go, right? And then if you think in those terms,
Yeah.
you will start appreciating the infrastructure. I'm not just talking about hardware here,
Yeah.
software as well.
Hmm.
Infrastructural components of your company are super important. Like,
Absolutely.
today's highway is not that concrete thing, physical thing. It is
Hmm.
the super highway, internet. That's where you need to gain the speed, right, to
Yes.
win the race, not over there the old style, right?
Hmm.
So I believe I will give I always cite Facebook as an example. Facebook versus
Hmm.
MySpace was doing the same thing. Facebook's infrastructure is so good. If service was the same in the
Hmm.
beginning, especially,
Hmm.
infrastructure was so snappy. Like, as soon as I put a picture here on
There.
my friends in India, or even in Europe, they will get it like this almost. And
Yeah.
they we know that it's a known fact now. They serve 98+% content from cache. It
Right.
never touches the disk when you put a request. So
Hmm.
that much cache. So speed gives you advantage. Speed is key, I think. And then I believe cloud gives you that. Cloud is mainly number one advantage of cloud is agility. That's what it is. If you are jumping into the cloud, I always say that, especially in the beginning, when the people move to cloud, if you're looking at the cost, you will never do it right.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
agree.
you will never do it right.
I agree. But
Yeah.
I
So
think this the speed part is complex too, because I think, and this is a bigger conversation, success in cloud to me is not just getting there, but it's
yeah,
operating there well. Like I tell my teams a lot of times, the goal is not just to be married, but it's to not be sleeping on the couch. Let's
yeah,
have a higher standard than just the baseline, right? And
yeah,
when you talk about speed, Sarbjeet, it's let me go back to something you said before, because I think this is interesting. I'm going to go back to the car analogy for a second, right? I've got a 2008 Honda Accord. I love Hondas. Mechanics have actually told me, Sarbjeet, that it's easier to fix my car than a 2020. And here's why. Because sometimes ease of use and convenience doesn't mean maintainable and fixable. Because right now, what's happening is, and this is like cars, say 2015 and on, so to speak, even if the part doesn't break, the sensor monitoring it goes out. And that's hard to fix. So here's the thought. Sometimes we're introducing more complexity, and that complexity is hard to fix. And I think that's part of what scares some people about cloud, right? When we were looking at servers and even VMs to a certain extent, we knew kind of what was running where. When you get into the spider web of cloud native stuff, and trust me, there are pros and cons to it, but I think that's what scares a lot of executives, right? A lot of CIOs. My application is spread across 30 different services in the cloud. I don't really know what it is anymore.
yeah, yeah,
It's a tapestry of all these different things now.
yeah. I think, okay, if you look at that, I think we need to simplify cloud going forward. We need to simplify it. We
Yes.
have to reduce the number of services, the number of interfaces, like the we need to make it easier to consume, right?
Yes.
I will give you the parallels to our old world, right? With like PCs. My mom was scared of PC, right? Seriously, my brother who is not computer literate, like he was like, I don't want to touch it, I will break something, right? They are not afraid of. My mom is not even afraid of iPhone, right? It's like it's very complex technology behind the scenes, but
Yes.
to the on the front end, it's so easy to use. We have to get that kind of simplicity in
Yes.
cloud consumption. I believe. I don't think technology, the newer technology is complex. I think it is like, let me take it back. Us engineers, actually, most of the time we over engineer stuff. That's
Yes.
our bad habit. Like we also,
Yep.
okay, let's build for future. I need three the parameters for this function. Let me put another user defined field in there, stuff
Yeah.
like that. If you're a coder, you can relate to it, right?
Yep.
So we yeah, I think I have said that, I think yesterday or day before yesterday, that technology is like fast food, right? Most of the new technology is like fast food, but you as a human being have to know, like, what your age is, what your physique look like. If you're already like 40 pounds over, like you shouldn't be consuming that. But if you're just growing up in high school, you can get that quarter pounder. It's okay, you can
Right.
digest it, right? So
Yep.
age of your company matters,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
What vertical you are in matters, right? What kind of
Yep.
family is around you, if you will. The food matters, right? And where you live, what are the, I mean, like, there's so many variables which impact the choices we make, right? The
Hmm.
weather outside, like all that stuff, right? It
Absolutely.
impacts us. So I think it's the same way with technology. We have to take into account mostly we usually take into account the top two, three variables into account. But I think the smart ones, or the organizations which are like very alert, they take into account more number of variables. I'll usually say that the
Yeah.
smartest system is the one which takes most number of variables into account while making a decision, right?
Hmm.
So let's come back to AWS reInvent. Like, I usually I bucketize these new announcements into different sort of pockets. At high
Yeah.
level, I put that into two buckets. One
Hmm.
is incremental enhancements,
Yes.
and the other one is like new, like wow kind of
Yep.
things. Like wow, I never thought that will happen.
Yeah.
Like Mac
Yep.
is EC2 instance. I
That
think
was
that
that was
I
big.
was I was I love it
That
because
was big.
I code iOS applications too. I recently coded some stuff,
Mm.
and I code that, like I would say 10% of my coding is on that. Um, Whenever I can code these days. But I think it will take the, for example, it will take the, it's a democratization of another platform to another set of people, right?
Yep.
That's what cloud was, the democratization of backend to the whole world.
Yep.
Front end was democratized. PCs were
It
everywhere,
was.
right? Laptops and all
It
that stuff,
was.
even the phones. But the back end was not. Cloud democratized the back end. So a person
Mhm.
sitting in a small village in India can write similar application what sort of Mark Zuckerberg and his team can, as long
Yep.
as they have, you know, they can start free too, by the way, right?
Exactly.
So
Free
I
tier. You
think
can.
Instagram was possible. I think it was 12 people, less
Hmm.
than 1 year old company, sold for $1 billion. That was only possible due to cloud, right? So I'm a cloud proponent. I just love that way of using technology. I think
I,
it
I
helps a
do
lot.
too. I mean, the barrier for entrepreneurship is lower than it's ever been before, right?
Exactly.
You know, you don't have to buy racks of servers and office spaces. You can start for $20 a month, right? Start free. You
Yeah.
want to add a little bit to that. I mean, you really can have the revenue hitting your books before the expenses are taking you out. So you could be a kid in high school growing a business now.
Yeah, I tell
So
kids when
cool.
I got talking to universities and all that stuff, like start doing stuff right now. It's
Yes.
available to you.
Yes.
Um, like you can start creating applications in a small way, and then you can build on top of that, and then
Yep.
and nobody stops you. So I think coming back to that, like putting these two announcements into two categories at a high level, what
Mhm.
what what do you think? Like, we can talk about the enhancements. Like, they are doing better ML now, than the last year. We can
Mhm.
talk about that for hours. But
Yeah.
what is the new stuff which you think, wow, that's good. That's a good step.
I
I
think
like that.
I would put into the new category Babelfish. I think
Uh,
that's one of the biggest announcements from the conference so far, right? The ability to say, Mr. or Mrs. Enterprise customer, I'm going to let you take your SQL Server databases and run them on Aurora Postgres. That's
yeah,
transformational.
yeah,
It's very disruptive to Microsoft on paper. But number two, you're allowing someone to take a proprietary database and run it on Amazon's Flavor, and they're going to do the translation in the middle. I think, in my opinion, that was maybe the most significant announcement at the conference, and I don't know if people really paid attention to that. The Mac thing is really cool. Don't get me wrong,
yeah. No,
but I
that's cool.
feel like that's in terms of the TAM,
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
a little bit more of a niche because there's still going to be small shops that are just compiling their iOS apps on Mac Minis in the closet. If you look at the SQL Server market, and you're someone who thought that you were going to have to put everything in Azure because of your licensing, and now you can not reduce your licensing, you can eliminate licensing. I mean, that this could be huge.
yeah. I think that can be huge. But why do I like the Mac story? It appeals to me because I come from a third world country like India, right? I
Hmm.
I I, I think some people will mind that calling India a third world country. It's a developing country, let's say. But I
Yes.
come from a developing nation.
Hmm.
Actually, I came out 25 years back. I People can't afford MacBook Pros and all that stuff. Kids want
Absolutely.
to write those applications. It's the age of Mobile will be even more stronger going forward. We, if you want to write applications for Apple's glasses, they will come in 2 years or 3 years,
Yeah.
whenever they come
Yeah.
out. The VR, AR is the future.
Yep.
Like, right now, all these stuff we're looking at, that this will gradually disappear, and we will have different interfaces to act with like to talk to machines. We will use different ways, right?
Hmm.
A brain machine interface and all that stuff. Apple will be in the forefront of it, and then if they don't have access to it, I think they will lag behind. I think it gives them, I actually personally hated the fact that I have to buy a MacBook Pro even though I can afford it. Like,
Yeah.
because I love PC for some reason, all the Microsoft stuff. I like that. I don't know. You can call me old style, but
Mhm.
I tried switching a couple of times to Mac for all the like 100% of the time, but I couldn't. So I think
Mhm.
it's a great step
It
forward.
is.
But from that point of, but yes, from money point of view, I think from the back end stuff, from the B2B back end stuff, I think SQL Server taking that sort of market share is huge. And on the back end stuff, I think EKS, open
Anywhere.
sourcing of that is
Yeah. That
even,
was
I think,
huge.
even bigger. And
That was
then the ECS on prem is huge.
that was huge.
ECS anywhere, I need to get more color on that personally, but I think I don't know how they will price if I want to put EC2 instances on Google Cloud. Like, how will
Mhm.
that work, right? Who will I pay? How much? So, like, how will Amazon make money from that? So, they say anywhere, right?
Mhm.
By the way, by I said anywhere doesn't mean everywhere, right? So those are two different things.
Yeah. Yeah. Agreed.
It
Agreed.
won't be
That's
everywhere.
yeah.
Um, yeah,
Those
I
are
think
all
it will be
really
as, huh?
those are all
Right.
really good. I mean, I think that the containers really becoming ubiquitous,
Yeah,
on-prem, off-prem, edge, whatever. I think that was cool. I forget the name of the service. They talked about this in the ML keynote, but there is I think it had to do with QuickSight. Essentially,
oh yeah,
this is a service that will look at your data and that will give you insights in plain English.
yeah,
So you even if you don't know where to look, you can start to have some insights about, because that's where we're struggling, right, Sarbjeet? With all this data, people want to move, in my opinion, from information to clarity to insight.
yeah,
Give me insight into this large data set and help me understand, like, what is it that, because if you don't know that, you don't even know what to look at, right? Small pit stop there. I really enjoyed the NFL part of the ML keynote, right? How they're using the next gen stats, and that even goes back to the bias stuff, right? I don't know if you saw that game where DK Metcalf, who plays for the Seattle Seahawks, he ran that guy down. Like it, so there
no,
was an interception, and this guy, now DK, he's like 6'5", 235. If from a bias perspective, like he looks like a bodyguard or a bouncer.
yeah,
This guy got up to 22.6, I believe, miles per hour on the field. He chased down a smaller guy who's also blazing fast. Bias would have told us a man that big cannot run that fast.
yeah,
But the
yeah,
data told us he did it.
yeah,
So this is really cool to me that you can quantify stuff that in our minds we would not have been able. The guy ran a 4.340. Like he's got 5% body fat. Like these stats are unlocking things that we would have thought were not possible before. The insights.
yeah. I think we have to challenge, like, without even data, without data, we always need to challenge these stereotypes, and then we I think media does that. Some of people in media do that all the time.
Mhm.
Um, and I think we need to educate people better on all these things, right? So it I think it's mainly education. We can do that through data or through other means, like media and entertainment, and movies have been doing this for a long time. Some
Mhm.
revolutionary movie makers, I mean, you can say revolutionary, or the people who want to change the world, they do that. They don't look at the money part, right?
Mhm.
So I believe that, th- okay, I'll tell you my personal one personal small story. I was going to Munich, in I think year 2000, 2001. I used to go back and forth, like, between Munich and San Fran. I did that for 18 months for working on a project. One time, a lady was sitting next to me, and I used to think, like, oh my god, systems are broken and this and that, and maybe a little
Mhm.
more, like, kind of negative attitude towards certain things, like, oh my god, so many people are on welfare, or this and that, like that's an example. And we were talking about this stuff, right? Why can't they work? That's naiveness of
Mhm.
people like me. Like, why
Mhm.
can't they work? Like, I'm working, why can't they work? And then, um it, it, over the years, and even before, actually, when I was growing up, like, people are product of their circumstances, right? We
Mhm.
are, you are, I am, everybody is, right?
Mhm.
So, having some empathy towards other people, I think helps. And at the same time, the lady said something which stuck with me forever. She said, there will be leakage in every system,
Yes.
right? That doesn't mean
Mhm.
you don't do it,
Agreed.
right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
there will be inefficiencies in cloud or whatever technology you pick. That
Yes.
doesn't mean you don't do it. There will
Agreed.
be problems with ML. That doesn't mean you don't do it, right?
Agreed.
There will be problem with your new car. That doesn't mean you don't buy the new car, and
Mhm.
you get stuck with Honda because it's cheaper to repair. That doesn't mean that.
Mhm.
So you gotta move on. You gotta take that leap of faith, if you will, right?
Yeah.
And
Keep
another
innovating.
analogy I use is, like, if you know there's a problem, like in certain domain, certain technology you're going to use,
Mhm.
right? Do you not use it right now, or you think that the problem, by the time you are fully up to speed on that tech, that problem will go away, Yeah, do you have that
Mhm.
trust in the system, right?
Mhm.
But the analogy I use is like we are going from San Francisco to LA, and there's an accident, right? At mile 300 or
Mhm.
250, right? Whatever that, I don't exactly know how many miles. I know it's 5.5 hours. We do it all the time. So, like, if there's a blockage over there, like, do you not start? You start, because you know
Yes,
by the time you get there, there will be a tow truck. They will clean up the stuff, right? And then
exactly.
you got to approach the life that way. And in business, I think it works the same way.
I agree.
um
I
yeah,
agree.
a lot of
I think the other
philosophy.
part of that is like when you're talking about those journeys and the innovation, Sarbjeet, I think you don't get better because you talked about the journey. You got better because you made the journey. When you make the
Exactly.
journey, you figure out how to be more efficient, where to stop for gas, where to eat, all that kind of stuff. And I like to say the same thing in tech, right? The person that we admire didn't get better because they waited. They got better because they started.
They started,
And
yeah.
they took that feedback and they iterated and they figured out where to make it better. And so we're in a case where if the barrier to get in is lower, and I think you're right, right? There are going to be people in developing countries that are building phones for Apple Watches now because
Yeah.
they can build that in the cloud, right? They don't
Yes,
have
yeah.
to have all the fancy gear, right? So that part is great. You can also turn it off or give it back because those
Yeah,
resources in the cloud, if you
cheap.
don't need them, it's elastic.
You start
You can
you
let
start free. You start free, yeah.
you start free. So I mean that part is great in terms of like we're tapping into the collective creativity of more and more people, and privilege is not a gate as much anymore, right?
Yeah.
And I think that my quick story about me, subject. My wife and I went to school together, undergrad and grad school. So think about getting married and competing in against your wife at University of Michigan in computer science and engineering, which is on a curve. So if she does better, I have to do worse. Her theory is, let me throw this out to you. Her theory is that people my age in their kind of early to mid 40s, part of why there were more women at that time that got into computer science is because the video games were less violent. It was Mario, it was Pac-Man, it was stuff like that. When you got
Oh
into Call
yeah.
of Duty and things like that, a lot of the girls tuned out until you had things like the iPhone come back in. Now technology is cool again and it's not associated with blood and guts and all this macho stuff. So the consumer things are kind of a barrier to entry potentially to those female technologists and those underrepresented groups that want to access the tech. And I think like in terms of just the way this all flows together, to me, the tech always started with things before the tech. I'm also a big believer that at University of Michigan, they have the School of Engineering co-located with the School of Music because studies have shown that people that are good at music are often good at tech because they're especially in the cloud world because they're good at dealing with concepts they can't touch, right?
Exactly, yeah.
A jazz musician has to improvise based on notes in his head, and that's how it is in the cloud. We're never going to see the inside of an Amazon data center.
Yeah.
We're touching services and concepts we've got to play within our mind and use that to create things.
Yeah,
I love that.
you need more imagination than, server huggers. Like, okay, I'm
Exactly.
going to hug the server today.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think what your wife said, I think it's a great sort of observation, which we tend to sort of ignore when once you're in it, you tend to ignore it. And I can relate to it because my wife always likes a Pac-Man. Like, we any game console we get, we're not very big gamer family, but we still get these consoles and all that stuff.
Hmm.
And then my daughters are playing on it, and then we have other games, and she will say Mario,
Hmm.
that's an old game. But because it's, as you said, because it's not violent, right?
Hmm.
And it's fun to play.
Yep.
So yeah, I think you're spot on.
And
Yeah.
what's interesting, I want to make sure we don't miss this theme from reInvent, right? The past couple weeks, if you go back to the past 2 years, hybrid did not exist in Andy Jassy's vocabulary. It did this year. Did you notice that? He
Yeah.
acknowledged that there is something other than an Amazon data center. He
But
talked
that
about the edge. He talked about hybrid. It was very different to me.
it was different, and Dion and I sat down, and he said it would be different. I think he had some intel on that, to be honest with you. So,
Mhm.
like, what's coming down the pike and what they're going to talk about. So interesting stuff. I think they cleverly redefined. I mean, that's how I see it. They cleverly redefined hybrid to their own advantage. Just
Yes.
calling data center an edge node. Yeah, it is edge node for
Mhm.
most of the data centers will be nodes. If you think about edge as like smaller compute power and storage and stuff like that.
Hmm.
in metros and all that stuff. That's true, but it's not today. And calling something uh, something which will happen in 10 years today, it's kind of, yeah, I get that. But at the same time, to be a little more like analysty type, I think we have I think they're sometimes I feel like Amazon is over their head a little bit, like they're a little cocky about stuff, they have some attitude about stuff, like, yeah, you're a leader, we know that you started 7 years before everybody else did,
Hmm.
because nobody else paid attention to it, and they thought that's not a right model to consume technology. But be a little nice. Be Don't throw other vendors under the bus that quickly.
Agreed.
Don't pick on Microsoft or Oracles of the world. I mean, I know they do that sometimes, and they just keep it interesting. But
Yeah.
those are great companies, I believe. They have a lot of install base, and they will do some good stuff. And and and, and in many ways, Amazon is playing the from the playbook of Microsoft in many ways. Like
They are.
developer friendliness of 90s from Microsoft was like
Hmm.
US number one language there.
Yep.
They loved developers, and that's what they are executing, but they're doing it better than what Microsoft did. uh,
Here's one thing that I take away from this, though, Sarbjeet. I think that so there was the theme of kind of consistency, and this is part of what's been going through my head as I listen to a lot of the keynotes: choice versus consistency versus complexity.
mhm.
And I think one thing that Amazon doesn't acknowledge sometimes is that in some ways being all in their ecosystem as opposed to being, say, multi-cloud, like say the NFL is, multi-cloud, I would argue, is still not realistic. I still think multi-cloud is being like Bo Jackson. How realistic is it to master two sports or two clouds? But I think Amazon doesn't do a good job of acknowledging how much complexity is just in AWS itself.
Yeah, yeah.
There's so many choices there. How are you picking the right instance in EC2 alone? We're talking one service that's got 1.7 million different variations depending on who you ask and how they're counting. How is there that much variation in one service in a catalog that stretches from A to Z and backwards? The complexity just to consume AWS well is off the chart now, and people need help with that problem.
Yeah, I think let's wrap up. I think with that, you were coming to our like all allocated time here. I think I'm with you on that. I think the complexity of like AWS sort of monolithic in a way. Like they're all like very individual small things, but in whole, it's a very monolithic sort of machine. It's pretty complex, right? I think it would be great talk to have to talk about what where can AWS stumble, or what are the things they're doing which can be a detriment for their growth, stuff like that. I think it will be a great session to have. I think
Mhm.
I think one thing which is playing well to their advantage is what I usually call feature proximity, a term which I'm trying to popularize.
Mm.
Like when you are doing this stuff, like you want to do that stuff, it's right there next to you, so
Yeah,
you don't have to
yeah,
go anywhere else. And as a
mm,
developer, I can appreciate that, like a
yeah.
new API and all that stuff, new way
Hmm.
of doing things that's easier, faster, cheaper, right?
Hmm.
They are masters of abstraction. I think they are great innovators. They work with the customer base like no other company almost does.
Hmm.
Their feedback loops are well oiled, I call it.
Yeah.
They're doing great, but at the same time, that doesn't mean they're not making some mistakes, or they are not being cocky, or they're not being, or they won't be cocky in future. Right now, they're picking on the licensing and all the stuff from other vendors. What about their pricing? And then today, it's on a funny note. Let's close this on a funny note. Actually, not a funny. It's maybe not funny. I don't know. Like they said, like they were doing the infrastructure keynote, right? They say
Hmm.
supplier diversity is the key in achieving this, right? And it's like, oh yeah, like it applies to cloud as well, right?
Right.
Yeah. What do you think? Why do you think it doesn't apply to the cloud? I
Yeah.
usually
Yeah.
talk about that
Yeah.
supplier diversity in cloud. You
Hmm.
need to go to another provider so that you can twist Amazon's arm. Like I can get better pricing there. So if
Yeah.
you're all Amazon, they can hike the price. I'm not saying they are doing it right now, but they can
Yeah.
do certain things certain way that you don't like, and how can you get out? So you need a supplier diversity for many reasons. And I actually, and during 2019, VMware sort of wrap up on actually Cube. CTO advisor was there too, with
Mhm.
Dave and John Furrier. I said this, like, some of these companies are too big to fail. Like, we're putting all eggs in one basket,
Yeah.
and it is crazy in a way that these are international like workloads sitting in one company in
Yeah.
US.
Yeah.
And I talked about it, and then that thing is being talked about more this year by the wider industry. I
Yeah.
think these are things that we need to think about. Like, are these
It's
companies
scary.
too big, too cocky? Yeah.
That's getting into the ethics part of it. I mean, even things like, you could just look at, what Bezos is worth now, 180 billion or whatever the number is. Like, one person having that much wealth, that many resources, and AWS and Amazon is kind of that way too. It's almost too much power for one company to have, but that's a conversation for another day.
For another day, for another day.
Yeah.
And thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Again, we're not bashing Amazon. They're doing great. They are helping so many companies move
Absolutely.
fast, and
Absolutely.
democratizing technology. And with that, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, sir.
Bobby, it's always nice to hear your fresh perspective and your analogies and the way you convey stuff.
Thank
It's
you.
amazing to hear that. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Keep
Thanks
doing
for
great work.
having me.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Take care. Bye bye.
You too.